Shantanu is the CEO of Adobe, which we talked about briefly at this company, and I'm going to say a few things. So last week he got one of India's highest civilian awards called the Padma Shri. But in the interest of time, I'll just keep this short. He's won many CEO of the Year awards, and Adobe's won Employer of the Year awards. It is, in short, a fantastic company with great leadership, and we're just so delighted that Shantanu could be here, and I want to thank the Beals for helping us get Shantanu as a speaker so we can all learn from his experience. But with that, tell us a little bit about sort of Adobe, because you describe your mission as changing the world through digital experiences. What does that mean to you as a sort of the leader of Adobe?
Well, happy to do that, Vijay, and thank you so much for having me here, and Don and Ken as well. When you think about Adobe, as Vijay said, I think most people know us perhaps for not just Photoshop, but also PDF. It's rare when you have two verbs that represent a company. And we definitely talk about the fact that our mission is changing the world through digital experiences. I think if you're in Silicon Valley, you have to say you're changing the world through something. Otherwise, it doesn't sound aspirational enough. But there are really two things that Adobe is focused on. The first is it's probably true every piece of communication that you see, whether it's the newspaper, magazine, website, packaging on a bottle of water, video, some piece of Adobe software was used to touch it. And so the first part of our mission is we say we want to empower people to create. This fundamental assertion that we have that everybody has a story to tell, right, whether you're a kindergarten student or the largest enterprise in the world. And so it doesn't matter what media type you want to use, what device you want to use, what form of communication, we want to help you create that. And so Creative Cloud, we say, is hopefully the one-stop shop from inspiration to monetization. And I'm sure we'll touch on our own transformation, but when we went through our transformation, the second part of our growth agenda and our initiative is really all about how do we help businesses transform? Like you, we certainly believe that software is going to change the world, has changed the world. And we feel like every company on the planet has to think about how they are digitally engaging with their customers. Because if they don't engage digitally with their customers, I would say they're operating blind. And so the second part of Adobe's business is really right now about all the software that we developed to make our own transformation. We're selling to enterprises because we believe they have to do it. Much like what Amazon did with either AWS in terms of a cloud service or what they've done with Washington Post as it relates to software.
So I actually didn't realize that that's what you had done. So these were internal tools that you then ultimately took to market, some of them at least.
Well, what happened, Vijay, if you roll the clock back a little bit, I took over in this role in 2007. And in 2008, we had record revenues. And I'm like, how hard can this be? Even I can do it, And then in 2009, the recession hit. And when the recession hit, our revenue dropped by 25%. We were a company that had very little to no recurring revenue. So It was all perpetual revenue. It was all one-time revenue. And we recognized that there were two things going on. First is, as you pointed out so articulately, we were not attracting new customers to the platform. The cost of software was an impediment for people using it. But I think perhaps most fundamental, we weren't innovating at a fast enough pace. We had these 12 or 18-month traditional product cycles. And so, if you think about it, when you have a 12 or 18-month product cycle and you have this perpetual revenue, the entire company is predicated on not talking to your customers. Because heaven forbid you should talk to your customers, people aren't going to buy the current version of the software because they know what's happening.
Right.
And we recognize that with the pace of change that was happening, the move towards the cloud, the move towards mobile, we had to completely rethink it. So that was happening on one front. On the other side, we recognize that, I used to go visit publishers in New York, Condé Nast, Meredith, Time Warner, the largest publishers in the world. And without Adobe software, they couldn't produce any of the content that they were producing. But when I'd go to New York and I'd say, I'd like to meet with executives, they're like, he's the CEO of Adobe, we'll meet with him, but why are we meeting with him?
Right.
And so we recognized that we weren't mission critical.
Right.
We weren't mission critical to where the world was going. We weren't helping them with the business of publishing. And so we bought a company called Omniture in 2009, and the whole intent behind that was we said data was going to be important, and if we aspirationally restricted what we focused on, we thought when the web first came along that we were creating web pages.
Right.
The much, much larger opportunity was creating websites.
Right.
Companies like Interwoven and Vignette and Documentum were created at that time. So in 2011, we said, hey, the world's going to move digital. The world's going to move to the cloud. If we artificially limit our aspirations to only being on the desktop, we'll get what we deserved. And so we did both.
Right.
We were developing the tools internally. We were transforming ourselves. But we said to ourselves, listen, supply chain's been automated, finance has been automated, HR has been automated. Why hasn't any company on the planet talked about targeting the chief revenue officer, the chief digital officer, the chief marketing officer with a brand of enterprise software?
Right.
We said, we're as good as anybody else. And so we actually embarked on both those fundamental transformations at the same time, circa 2009, 2011.
So to follow up on that, on the second one, when you start targeting the CDO, the chief revenue officer, what did that mean to Adobe? Like, what products do you have to build to sort of target those particular executives and their responsibilities?
Well, the first thing we did was analytics, because
Sure.
we said, again, data was important. I'll fast forward. We now process 200 trillion transactions on behalf of our customers. 200 trillion transactions.
I bet you didn't know that.
I wish we would charge a certain revenue amount for every transaction that we had, right? But what we said was everything that you need to engage with your customers digitally, we should create that entire stack. It starts with web content management. So, all of the world's top web brands now, or financial services, retail, travel, and hospitality, it started with web content management system and analytics. We have an advertising cloud that allows you to attract customers. We have things like search and recommendations that allow you to personalize the service that you have. We have communication, so all of those pesky emails, if you get pesky emails from companies, we're probably...
From us.
Yes.
That's why they're here.
We're probably powering that. We have audience segmentation. So think of it, in a nutshell, as anything that you need to engage with customers digitally, we want to do it. And part of the way I describe that is the first generation of enterprise software, everybody automated the back office.
Yes.
Correct? You decided on your financial system and everything else was built around it. The CFO was the most powerful. The second generation of enterprise software, you probably automated the front office. Microsoft Office, SharePoint, collaboration tools. We think the imperative for every company in this digital era is you start with your customer and build in.
Sure.
When you think about the companies you talked about, with a single mobile app, they've disrupted industries.
Yes.
And so that's the way we're thinking about it, which is how can we help them? And all the customers you talked about, or the companies, are our customers, because they're using our digital tools to engage with their digital customers.
That's good to know, but I suspect most companies are also your customers. But Shantanu is being very modest, but so the market cap of Adobe has sort of gone up by $100 billion just in the last 4 years, 5 years, something like that. I want to get...
That's why I get to be here. Otherwise, my successor would be telling you how brain dead all of the things that I did was.
And that's why you need tenure in a university system. But one of the things that I want to really spend some time on, because it's really important to all of the people in this room, is this shift to sort of, I don't even know what to call it, but a continuous time business. Because most companies are in the business of selling a product or a service, and then you don't see your customer again. So even though it may not be software, you sell a car, you do it once every 5-7 years, you sell an insurance policy, you hope you never see the customer again, those kinds of things. But now you're in a world where software mediates more and more physical products. And I think a lot of companies, at least the ones I talk to, struggle with the notion of getting into what does it mean to... The reason we say think like a software company is because now you're doing releases. You're changing the entire culture to where, what's good enough, I don't have to wait for perfection, just keep sort of shipping at the right levels and at the right times. How did you approach sort of the change in sort of the philosophy, operating model, whatever you want to call it?
It was hard, and I think as part of the transformation, when we said we were going to go from shipping boxes to shipping, software continuously, the other thing that we had to do was revenue declined again by 25%. And actually our EPS, when we announced we were moving to the cloud, EPS moved by 65%. We reduced, no. Because you're not recognizing all that revenue up front and you're recognizing it ratably, EPS moved from $2.35 to $1.
Sure.
The first year that we did it. But I think this insight associated with the fact that, we like to use a couple of assertions, Vijay. The first assertion that we use in our business all the time is, if you're in software or if you're in technology, basically every business has an S-curve.
Right.
So if you don't recognize that you have to disrupt yourself, there's somebody in a garage in the valley trying to disrupt you. And so that was one of the things that really motivated us. We recognized that we had millions of people using our software, but we really had no insight into what features they were using. So there were academic debates in terms of, do you think they like this feature? And we said, why don't we just measure it, right? And so the other sort of hypothesis assertion that we made in the company was, we said, every time we do a business review, I want somebody to say the narrative, what's happening, but I want data. And a narrative without data, we throw them out of the room, and just data without the narrative, we throw them out of the room. So I think we had a couple of these assertions about how we wanted to run the company. But I'll give you an example. We were competing on a product called Lightroom, which was a product for imaging. And the big competitor in that space used to deliver this 12 or 18-month cycles. So we said, you know what? We will completely be transparent with our customers about everything that we're doing. We're going to put our roadmaps on there. We're going to allow people to give us feedback. And so suddenly you harness the power of this community.
Yes.
So I think this notion of first, if you're not operating with data, and digital certainly enables you to capture that data far more easily than anything else, and if you're not harnessing the power of the community, who's probably motivated to help you because they want products that they can use and help them, and it was those two insights. And so by the time we shipped that product, we had millions of active users.
Right.
And I think all of the companies that you talked about, it's that data and that insight that really just enables them to deliver better products. And for everybody in physical goods, the thing that I would say is, it doesn't matter which business you're in, people today want to buy an experience. They don't want to just buy the product. The reality is, with Lyft or Uber, you have an experience.
Absolutely.
With any hotel right now, you have that experience. And so if you recognize that it's the entire experience, when I go into a hotel room right now, I don't want to go to the front desk and check in anymore. Right? I have my phone, I go straight to my room. That's an experience, right? It knows exactly what I've been. And so if you think about it that way, and have whatever is appropriate in your businesses as these core assertions, I think that guides you along the way. And maybe the one other thing I would say that we got really comfortable with in the Valley was this belief that if you can connect all the dots from where you are today and where you want to go, you're probably not being aspirational enough.
Correct.
And so how do you harness the ingenuity and innovation of the tens of thousands of employees that we have? So you sort of plant this flag, and the truth is you don't know yourself how to get there.
Right.
But amazing individuals help you figure that out. And so we said we want to deliver software faster. We want to know what our customers want. We have this belief that we can deliver the best stack in marketing. And then the power of the internal employees aligns around that.
But do you think, you said two things, both of which sort of align really well with what we've been arguing for, which is, one is you need to have a point of view and a set of hypotheses.
Right.
Around where this, because too often you find debates internally where companies are debating two sort of potential strategies, but if you say, what do you believe about the future state of the world, you get two different answers, which then sort of derives from this. So I love the idea of the narrative and the data. But so now so when you start talking about the community, obviously you're a platform company.
Yep.
And you've got multiple platforms. You've got Creative Cloud, you've got Document Cloud and Experience Cloud. But you also have companies, you bought Marketo and Magento. How do you sort of, A, put all this together, and B, bring in sort of this entire community on an ongoing basis? Because these platforms are built only if they're supposed to have a long life.
That's right. And I think you're so influenced by your heritage. John and Chuck, who started Adobe, they were both fundamental researchers at Xerox PARC. And when they created PostScript, which was the first fundamental innovation that the company did, I mean, we all take desktop publishing for granted, but they created desktop publishing. That was, from day one, it was like, we're going to have an open system, and you believe that the entire community, if they can engage with you, that's better. Competitive dynamics don't come from, being a closed system. PDF, from day one, was an open system. We support PDF, and that's why, whether it was the FDA or the IRS, they endorsed PDF. And now the court system for archival. So, that notion of all innovation is not restricted to the four walls of your enterprise. And the way to compete today is to innovate and run faster than the bear, so to speak, than to, necessarily, keep it all proprietary. I think that's helped. But the mechanics associated with that within the company are very different. There's a sense of openness. You have to be comfortable with ambiguity, and you have to change fast. I mean, part of these points of view is it's okay to have a point of view. If your point of view is wrong, you have to be comfortable changing that point of view. And I think, I like to say, you want more at-bats at a company. You're not always going to be right, correct? But you want more at-bats.
Especially since this is such an uncertain time. I remember when I started teaching in business schools 30 years ago, the world didn't change anywhere close to as fast. And so you were really managing the status quo. And now the status quo is no longer an option. So your point about experimentation and risk-taking, I think all sort of comes together. I'm going to give the audience a heads up that I'm going to come to you for questions in a couple of minutes. We should have runners in the back. I want to switch gears a little bit because I read about this really interesting partnership you're doing with SAP and Microsoft, the Open Data Initiative. Tell the audience a little more about what that is and how you think it can help all of us.
Sure. I think if you think about enterprise software, and I hopefully touched on these sort of generations of enterprise software, what I think all of you would recognize is everybody's talking about AI and machine learning, but everybody's also talking about software as a service.
Correct.
And when you think about software as a service, you think about what a company like Workday has done, which is disrupt traditional on-premise software to deliver it through the cloud. Adobe's done that for marketing and creativity. ServiceNow has done that for IT service management. But what we think is that while these applications have moved to the cloud, the data has not yet moved. The data is still in all these silos as it relates to, what is your HR data versus your financial data versus your customer data. And so, we fundamentally believe that in order to deliver that great engaging experience for a customer, you need to be able to tie all those data together with trust, with privacy, so that the experience you want, I mean, there's nothing more frustrating for every one of you as a customer if you go buy a particular piece of goods from a company and then you get an ad telling you why, it's 10% off right now and would you buy it? And so the ability to connect all those data silos we think is an unsolved problem in the cloud. And so we got together with Microsoft and Satya and Bill McDermott at SAP and said, listen, between the three of us, we have so much data. We have transactional data, we have behavioral data, we have IoT data. First, we have to recognize that all this data is owned by our customer. That's, by the way, one of our core, the line in the sand that we drew was the data that we are collecting, it's on behalf of our customers. But if we can empower that data to be worked effectively on behalf of the consumer that they have, that'd be effective. And so we're agreeing on how do we define that taxonomy for the data, how do we make sure it interoperates. And so you can understand if you're doing a promotion in our marketing system, what is the lifetime value of that in a financial system? If you're collecting data, based on IoT data, what are the downstream implications of that? And perhaps most fundamentally, Vijay, right now, if you have all of that data, are you enabling people to apply data science and AI ML so that you can learn from the trends? And again, if these are silos, it's impossible for a company, whether you're in retail, travel, hospitality, financial services, government, to take advantage of that data. And so that's the ambitious initiative that is underway. And again, it's sort of based on that core hypothesis of you have to be open and you have to say, this data is owned by the customer.
So what is the output of that going to be? Is it going to be standards by which we can interchange data? Is it going to be products?
Both of them. Both of them. I mean, it's certainly standards. ODI has a standard. Today, when you talk about standards, it's also mostly what is the programmatic interface that people have so that they can access that data and interface it with other systems. But it's also our own applications.
Right.
If Adobe's Marketing and Experience Cloud interfaces with Microsoft's Dynamics and Power BI for visualization, then all of you don't have to spend your valuable IT resources making that integration work. And so, both of those, we will be successful when we deliver that value across both those dimensions.
And I think that's a real powerful acknowledgement of the reality that most companies find themselves in today. I always find it amusing when you hear company executives tell you about all the data they're acquiring, and sort of your question back is, have you used the data you already have?
Right.
And oftentimes the answer is no. Let me look for any questions for Shantanu. Right here in the middle, please.
It's a great question. The question was around, by being transparent about your roadmaps with your customers, you're also being transparent about your roadmap with your competitors. And so, how do you deal with that? It's this fundamental assertion that if you have to compete in this space, you have to innovate faster than anybody else can. And even if the other competitors take advantage of some of that, we feel like interoperability between our customers is okay. And it really has completely changed how the company thinks about it. And you have to make the bet that the benefit of getting millions of customers to engage with you offsets the ability for a competitor to engage with you. And if you believe that fundamentally, and the other assertion that we make is interoperability between our applications. I think we won on the desktop, not just because Photoshop was best in class and PDF Acrobat was best in class and Illustrator and InDesign, but because colors and types and font faces and the user experience worked exactly the same across those applications. We have that same assertion on the enterprise. We have to make sure that our analytics is best in class, our content management is best in class, our advertising ability for you to spend digitally is best in class. But if that interoperates with everybody, that we will provide more value than anybody else can. And we do have scale. And so I think if you believe those fundamental assertions, but it changes the dynamics. And I was in a meeting yesterday where I'm like, we are talking about a new product that's called XD. It's experience design. We believe everything's going to have a screen. And if everything's going to have a screen, Adobe should produce software that enables you to deliver for every screen. And they have some really exciting things that they're working on. And I'm like, where's it on the web? I always go to the web, and I go to adobe.com, and I did a search for it. I'm like, why isn't it there? And they're like, well, that's really confidential and proprietary. And I'm like, put it out there. And so I think when you also get the message consistently, people do what you inspect, right? In companies. And if you inspect that and, if you repeat that over and over and over again, everybody's like, wow, he's comfortable doing it. And actually, the most interesting thing is, I'm telling every employee in the company that I trust that they will do the job better than any other competitor. So think about the power of that, right? Which is, I'm telling every employee, talk about it. Nobody else is going to be able to compete because you're the best in the world. That's a pretty, I think, motivational, hopefully it's a motivational thing for people to know that I completely trust in my gut that we can do it better than anybody else can.
Let's take a question back there.
It's a really good question, and I will say I winced a little bit when you said, we took this big risk when we moved from, desktop software to the cloud. I actually don't use the word risk. I say we make investments. Some of them work, and some of them don't. And if I'm very comfortable with the fact that my job as CEO and my management team's job as CEO is we make some investments.
Right.
It doesn't, Vijay, I'm a cricket buff, probably like you. And I know baseball is the thing here, but people go to the Hall of Fame in baseball batting 300, which means you fail 7 times out of 10.
Right.
Correct? And that's really stuck with me in terms of, I'm paid to make investments. I'm paid to make changes. How do we celebrate failure? I think we don't call it failure. I think we call it, what are the learnings from a project where the investment didn't work out?
Right.
And again, going back to the previous question, if you send that message that, it's okay. It's okay to try something and not be as successful. if you can get the learnings out of it. Now, if you fail at the same thing over and over again, that's probably a problem. But I think if you do that mindset, think about it. We try and emulate Sandhill Road. For those of you who don't know, Sandhill Road is the venture community in the valley. Probably the greatest wealth creation in the world has happened on Sandhill Road. And on Sandhill Road, if you have an idea for a particular product, and you go and you have 10 VCs that you meet, and 9 of them say no, 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 and the 10th person says yes, guess what? You've got your money and you're off and running. In most companies, it's the reverse, right? You have to get 10 yeses and 1 person no kills the idea. Right. And so, if you think about it with a different perspective of, how you run the company, I think you get just far more comfortable with some of these things. Your batting average should be good. Beyond that, it's okay.
This is the land of Mike Trout, after all, so we know how that works in baseball. But I will close with this. I do think what you've achieved is extraordinarily difficult to achieve because, in words everything sounds simple, but if you talk to everybody here, that companies really struggle with making the transformation in the way that you've achieved. Are there any last parting words of advice that you would want to leave our audience with?
I think the power of digital, and I think the whole conference seems about, the road to reinvention. I think it's such an energizing thing in a company. And I'm sure I speak for all of you as business leaders. How many times have you looked back and regretted on a change that you made versus regretted that you didn't do that sooner?
Exactly.
And I think if you take that perspective, and hopefully the perspective that I offer, which is our job as leaders is, dealing with ambiguity and driving change. It's a really exciting time. I mean, the power of engaging, it doesn't matter in which industry you are with customers. We didn't touch on AI and ML. I think getting insights from, what that data tells you to deliver a better service, the power of that is better than anything I've ever seen before. I've been in software all my life, and you see the move to the cloud or move to mobile as tectonic shifts. The pace of which that's happening is better than it's before. And maybe the last but not least is go hire some scary, smart young people. I mean, our hiring so much right now is about people who bring that really different and fresh perspective. Maybe it's a pitch for the university as well, which is sort of doing this analytics. It is so energizing.
Yes.
To be with 100 of those scary, smart kids because they've grown up in this with this digital DNA that you talk about. And I always say I have the best job in the company because I get exposed to all of that.
Well, that was a wonderful set of insights. Thank you so much, Shantanu, for spending
Thank you for having
with us.